Donald Trump becomes the first former U.S. president convicted of felony crimes. We're going to go over that. That is arguably going to be the vast majority of what we talk about here today. So strap yourselves in for that, because I've got a lot to say about that, especially from the reaction and what may possibly be happening in my state coming up at the end of middle of next month. So we'll talk about that, what's happening there, and what we do with that, if we get to it. In other news, Joe Biden has allowed Ukraine to hit Russia with American weapons as long as they stay near Kharkiv. The pier that we spent $320 million on has collapsed, and CNN is trying to tell us that it's not collapsed. And Joe Manchin has left the Democratic Party, so we'll talk hopefully about that. Unless, of course, I spent the next 2 hours bloviating about the Trump trial. So strap yourselves in, grab a drink, call your friends, get some more people in here, because, hey, we only grow with word of mouth and a little bit of help from Twitch if you guys chat enough. And they built the blast furnace here along the shore, and they made the cannonballs that helped the Union win the war. Here in Youngstown, my sweet Jenny, I'm sinking down, here darling, in Youngstown. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Everybody, welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar. On a temporary shift to Monday night, I have had a shift in my work schedule, which will involve working only 4/10s. The sacrifice is that I've given up all of my Saturdays for the foreseeable future, but I will have Mondays and Tuesdays off coming up. And, well, they're going to keep me on for Tuesdays for a few weeks for training, because I am going to a whole new type of job at this. So I've got to learn how to do this type of job in the next coming weeks, and that is why we are running on Monday. I think this is going to run for maybe a month. I don't think it's going to run for 2, because I know that they're looking for their Saturday person. So for maybe about the next 4 weeks, we'll be doing this on Monday. Then we will be back on Tuesday. Unless, of course, we get a huge influx of people coming in on Monday because the schedule works for them. Because I am willing to adjust to get more people in here. That is true. Also, apologize for the 15-minute late start. I hit the stream button, and then I got an alert from OBS that said, hey, your RTMP is not connected. And I went over to the restream and it says, hey, you don't have sufficient access to all this kind of stuff. And, well, I talked to their customer service and said, hey, you know what? Look at my billing. I paid the bill. Here's my invoice that said I paid the bill. Here's the plan that I'm on that says I'm supposed to have all this stuff, so fix it. And the guy says, oh, okay, I'm going to turn everything on for you right now, and we'll have an absolute answer back for you in a couple days, 2 to 3 business days. So they got right on that. They are fixing that, and that's where we're at with that. But those fuckers. Yeah, and literally everything that's on my Restream account, I am supposed to be able to just jump right on and go with this. I haven't changed anything. I haven't changed the billing card or anything else. That is on their end, not mine. So, Vaughn, no, I did not boomer my own stream. Restream boomered it for me. So that is what happened with that. But we're here. We are back on. We are live on all channels, including Rumble. That was one of the big ones. He says, hey, you have to turn off your custom RTMP. I said, bullshit, I do. I paid for that fucker. I paid for that. I paid for Facebook pages, so you can take that and shove it up your ass. No, I didn't say that to them because they were actually really nice about it. And I don't want to be mean to somebody who's actually really nice about it. They got it in. They got it taken care of. We are here, but we have a lot to go over here today over these next 2 hours. I am sure we're going to spend the vast majority of this talking about the Trump trial. I know that I've got some rants about this, and, well, let's be realistic. I mean, even Styx only put one video out on Friday because nobody was talking about anything else on this week. I know the Ukraine story got buried. I want to get to the Ukraine and Kharkiv story because that got absolutely buried and it didn't need to be, but I know a lot of this is going to take a lot of precedence. So also, while we're in and at this, before I get into the live chat, Mog, I will come out and say the thank you because I saw it before we went live, who has resubscribed at Tier 1, subscribed for 13 months. Enjoy keeping the emotes, even though you don't use mine, but enjoy keeping those. Those of you who are on the rest of the subscriptions that I think the Mog actually gifted most of them to you, enjoy the extra emotes as well. So we have that going on here. Let me get a refresh so I can see myself, my own lovely face on the Twitch stream. And I think it is just about time for us to get started. Let's have just a little bit of a look on who we have here. Palm, of course, is first. Vong is second, but Palm got an alert on Snapchat before everybody else got their I was going to say OBS, no, their Discord alert. Palm says, nothing happened this week. Maybe tomorrow. Was there any news, says Mog? I think we might be able to dig just a little bit of it up. Just a little teeny tiny bit. Let's see. Palm's week gets better tomorrow. Armageddon can only do improvements, says Mogwai. You stick around for the survey. No, because they haven't officially resolved everything yet. Mog says, witch hunt. Fong says, Ed is a boomer. Deal with it. No. I am one generation separated from boomer. I am on the line between millennial and Gen X. So, suck it. Alright, we got news to get to today, so let's get into it. Let's get started. And thank you again to Restream, by the way, for getting this all sorted out for me and let me go live while you figured it out on the back end. Which is an ironic thing to say in the month of June. Alright, where is my news scene? Alright, let's do it. Let's do this! Starting today with the Dissociated Press. Guilty! Trump becomes the first former U.S. president convicted of felony crimes. There is a lot to unpack with this, but I knew that this was coming. Like, I looked at this, and I looked at a lot of things, and I looked back, number one, at the Chauvin trial and the Rittenhouse trial, both of which should have been taken out of the district that they were tried in. They should not have been tried in the court that they were tried in. And this travesty of justice should not have been tried in the court that it was tried in. Not that in this case especially, there was really any other place that it could be tried. And honestly, I could say the same about Chauvin and Rittenhouse too. As much as the news media hyped them up and did everything. And I'm going to play devil's advocate to the leftoid mindset of this too. I mean, you could have remanded this case and went back and tried it in Wyoming, and the same amount of people would have looked at this and said, there's no way this is a fair trial. They judge shop. They picked a place that was favorable to them, and it's horrible, and it's evil, and it's because he's the orange man, and he's both orange and evil and orange. Same with Rittenhouse. As hyped up as that trial was, where do you go and try that? Were there impartial jurors? Now, as far as the Rittenhouse trial goes, I will admit to the fact that there were situations there where the people didn't just see the district that they were sitting in get torched and vandalized and graffitized and everything else just a year prior. Because where the courthouse is, and especially with me knowing Kenosha, where this courthouse is like right in the thick of where all the action was happening during the St. Jacob trials. So you would have taken that bias out of that, but you still would have been sitting in a situation where really half the country wouldn't have accepted it because more right-wing bias. Same thing with the Chauvin trial. And again, where the courthouse was in Hennepin County, where it still is in Hennepin County, is right smack dab in the middle of where all the action was happening that we all sat and watched on TV and on the internet for that. The trial was so publicized, the charges were so publicized, and the event in question was plastered all over every news and social media screen, so you could have remanded that trial to Wyoming. And half of the country would have looked at that and said, well, my right-wingers, they're just trying to charge this. Now, you would have taken away the bias of people walking through the chaos and carnage. And I'm going to talk about why that's important, but let's read what the Associated Press first says is historic. From Michael R. Sisak, Jennifer Peltz, Aaron Tucker, Michelle L. Price, and Jill Colvin. For the record, that is 5 people to write one article. Donald Trump has become the first American president to be convicted of felony crimes Thursday as New York jury found him guilty of all 34 charges in a scheme to illegally influence the 2016 election through a hush money payment to a porn actor who said the two had sex. Trump sat stone-faced while the verdict was read, and cheering from the street below could be heard in the hallway on the courthouse's 15th floor where the decision was revealed after more than 9 hours of deliberations. And you wonder why these jurors were not in a situation where they could be impartial. Mark says he's physically Gen Z, but a boomer in spirit. No, that would be Vaughn. You picked the Twilight Zone. The coverage was insane in the zone. There's no way Trump gets a fair trail. Now, very important. I'm not going to read the next sentence out loud on the Associated Press. If you are watching on screen, I'll highlight it so you guys can read it there, either now or after the fact if you're watching the replay. You can see what I've highlighted right there. For those of you listening on the audio platform, the next sentence, let me see if I can paraphrase around that. The next sentence was an angry Trump telling reporters that the trial was, how do I want to put this? Held up on the mast through a series of netting that allows people to go up and check the sales. That's what it was. Again, we'll get through some of this article and I will tell you why I am dancing around this. And why I think that there are a few YouTubers who might either get a strike or lose their channels over this in the near future. Because remember, of course, YouTube retroactively bans. So if you say something that's untoward, but it was within the TOS when you said it, and they change the TOS, they'll go back before the TOS change and hit your video with it. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. They know what happened, and everybody knows what happened here. Juan Mercan set sentencing for July 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where GOP leaders who remained resolute in their support in the aftermath of the verdict are expected to formally make him their nominee. Just days before the RNC convention, by the way. That's going to be important later when we talk about that delightful skeleton that runs my state, Tony Evers. The verdict is a stunning legal reckoning for Trump and exposes him to potential prison time in the city where his manipulations of the tabloid press helped catapult him from a real estate tycoon to reality television star. This is an editorial, by the way. That's not actually what happened. It's just that the Associated Press, which has become a left-wing outlet, it is no longer an impartial newswire, wants you to sit there and believe that the only reason this man became president was because of what happened with the National Enquirer. As he seeks to reclaim the White House in this year's election, the judgment presents voters with another test of their willingness to accept Trump's boundary-breaking behavior, and Burgum, I think, hit it on point. And we'll be talking about that in just a bit as well. Trump is expected to appeal the verdict and will face an awkward dynamic as he returns to the campaign trail. Tagged with convictions, there are no campaign rallies on the calendar for now, though he traveled Thursday to a fundraiser in Manhattan that was planned before the verdict, according to 3 people familiar with his plans who were not authorized to speak publicly. He's expected to appear Friday at Trump Tower and will continue fundraising next week. His campaign was already moving quickly to raise money off the verdict. We will be talking about that and the shutdown of Win Red temporarily. Mr. Zed joined over on the Instagram side. Issuing a pitch that called him a political prisoner. Also important. See, the Associated Press is trying to use the propaganda and the way that they wrote this to try to pin everything as saying he's absolutely a felon because the jury said so, and they did exactly what we wanted, and he's only the president because he paid off the porn star and everything else. Now, first thing that I'm going to say, with the line that I highlighted before, and I said this on X already, I pointed this out. On Wednesday I think it was Thursday before we got the verdict, I had pointed out, and this is important because remember what happened in 2020. I do see a world, and they have not dropped a new TOS yet, but I do see a world, a physical world, where Google and YouTube look at this and say, just like they did with questioning the 2020 election, oh, you're questioning the results of this trial? Well, that's dangerous. You're putting the lives of the jurors at risk. Banned. Oh, you're questioning this? You're a dangerous conspiracy theorist. Banned. You can't accept the outcome of a fair legal process? Strike. The leftoids will come back and say, you're being a conspiracy theorist right now. They literally did it for questioning the results of the 2020 election. That's the reason that I say honk honk every time that I say Biden won. Because I totally believe that. YouTube, don't ban me. And I would suggest to all the other YouTubers out there, look at your back catalog accordingly and check it accordingly. I'm not one that wants to come out and suppress free speech, but there are a lot of people out there that I respect that I don't want to see them lose their channels, especially when some of them have a lot of years of work, garnering a good subscription base behind them that I don't want to see banned. Full out. I don't want to see these people go away. Even some of the ones that I don't watch anymore because of personal incidences that I've had with the creators personally. I don't want to see anything happen to their channels. For the most part, they're good people. So that is what I have for that from the Hill. Speaking of things that I'm probably going to have to tiptoe over for this because of us being on YouTube. From the Hill, Trump verdict brings GOP skeptics into the fold, from Alexander Bolton. The guilty verdict rendered against former President Trump is bringing moderate Republicans and longtime Trump skeptics to his side in a way that Trump's campaign has failed to do for months. Longtime Trump critics, including Mitch McConnell and Susan Collins, are among others, are rallying to Trump's defense after the verdict, and other Trump-leered Republicans, including Nimrata Haley, are expected to do so as well. Haley, who said last week that she would vote for Trump over Biden, has so far stayed quiet about Trump's conviction, but prominent Republicans, even some of his biggest critics, say the case brought by DA Alvin Bragg was fundamentally unfair. McConnell said after the verdict that the charges should have been brought in the first place, and predicted the conviction will be overturned on appeal. And Collins said Bragg had blurred the lines between the judicial system and the electoral system by running for the district attorney's office on a pledge to prosecute Trump. This decision has the same dramatic effect across the country like President Clinton's impeachment. They are very different scenarios, but both caused a massive rally effect. With Clinton, it was the Democrats, and now with Trump, it's the Republicans who believe there's a judicial overreach, said Ron Bonjohn, a Republican strategist and former senior Senate and House leadership aide. Bonjohn said McConnell's surprise defense of Trump is a signal to the other traditional mainstream Republicans to rally behind the former president. He's giving the establishment Republicans permission to be supportive of Trump going into November. That is a fair point, Fung. Some of that I can't say on YouTube, but that's an absolutely fair point to bring up. 100%. Now, as far as a lot of this goes, and while I don't think any of this would personally affect Mitch McConnell, what he is looking at when he does this is the rabidity of the Democratic base. Remember, I was among these people through W's years, and I was way too young to be among them through HW's years. But I thought both of those men should have gone to fucking prison. Absolutely. They're war criminals. They're jackasses, and the only reason that we didn't have the economic crash of Obama under the Bush years, which was fueled mostly by Clinton policy, is because a bunch of us suddenly started getting combat pay for being in active war zones or a war that W started. He didn't save the economy, he just pushed it back 2-3 years by putting a bunch of extra government pay in a bunch of people's pockets and freeing them up from their jobs to have other people jump in and take them while they volunteered and went overseas. I've done a lot of analysis of the 2008 crash, and every analysis that I've looked at says that should have happened in about 2002 to 2003. But as far as McConnell goes, as I was saying before I went off to a tangent about W, the fervor of the leftoids to jail whichever Republican is in the most amount of power at any given time, and yes, that could be Boehner, Paul Ryan, or Mitch McConnell himself. That goes way back. I know there's a recency bias, and a lot of people think that this all started with Trump. It didn't. I was standing shoulder to shoulder with people calling for Bush to be put in prison. Now again, even though some of my political leanings have changed as my eyes have been opened, my sentiment on W has not. There were calls to see Reagan put in prison for the things that he did. HW. Hell, they actually tried with Nixon. And there were people who wanted to put Ford in prison just literally based on the fact that he pardoned Nixon. So none of this is new, and McConnell knows that. But now they actually have the process to do it. Get said person out of office and then cook something up. I am always entertained by the Ron bros out there who legitimately think, like honestly 100% legitimately think, that there is not somebody out there, whether it's true or not, that has some accusation to levy against Ron DeSantis, waiting in the wings for if he does get brokered into the GOP nomination at the convention. Once again, now they know what to do. And this does affect the caucus, both on the establishment side and the populist side of the GOP. Going down the ranks. Yes, the leftoids, and myself included at the time, absolutely called for Bush to go to prison. But nobody in the system would have done it. A, they would have thought that there would have been political repercussions and people would have had to start looking at the Democrats. And B, half the country wouldn't have accepted it. Same thing with lock her up, which I told those people at the time they were being tremendously moronic and the other R word that I can't say on YouTube. Because they were. Has Hillary Clinton committed crimes? It's not been determined, but I have my suspicions. Should she be locked up for those crimes? Absolutely not. Would she ever get a jury out there, knowing full well that the jurors would all 12 have a sudden case of depression, leading to self-deletion? No, that would probably never happen. It isn't just left, though. It's been lately on the left, but Gingrich had a hard-on to get Clinton in prison for the Whitewater. It's just who was in power at the time. That is a fair point as well. But yes. Even former Vice President Pence, who refused to endorse the former boss, called the verdict an outrage. The conviction of former President Trump on politically motivated charges is an outrage and disservice to this nation, Pence told Fox News Digital. That is a little bit more self-serving, though, for Pence, because remember, with Pence, as soon as he became the vice presidential nominee, suddenly we started hearing about electroshock therapy against the gays. Whether or not he actually did that or tried to get that done, I don't know. I was working with Elaine at the time who lived in Indiana, so lived under the governorship of Mike Pence. But I was never able to get a clear answer on legislation or pending legislation for that one. I don't know if that's true or not. But every leftoid in the world believes that it is. So that is what we have for that. Trump slams his conviction. Trump lays out revenge strategy after conviction makes him a felon, from Taylor Penley. That's over at Fox News. Former President Trump, fresh off his New York criminal conviction for falsifying business records, told Fox News he'll get even with his adversaries by getting his old job back. My revenge, it'll be a success. It'll be a great success, the best success. No one's gonna have success like me. Trump said in an exclusive sit-down with Fox and Friends weekend. These are bad people. They're the worst. These people are sick. Just absolutely sick, okay? And they do things that are so destructive. If they weren't me, they'd be going after someone else. And I know a lot of the competition that wouldn't do so well. Only I can do well. Nobody can do as well as me. People in his corner have made similar remarks, criticizing Juan Merchan for his alleged bias in the prosecution's favor. Many have also accused the Biden justice system of being weaponized against the president's chief political opponent. In the key segments of the interview that aired on Sunday, the GOP frontrunner weighed in on several key topics, including what he seeks in an AG if elected this November, and whether he would declassify several key files that have been the subject of conspiracy and speculation. Now see that. I made my list. It's in the same notebook here that I use to keep track of the ABV of the wines that I make. But I made a list of things that I would have to see in order to vote Trump. Now, declassification was not on that list, but that does move me in that direction. Absolutely. I would love to see more of the government declassified, honestly. He told co-host Rachel Campos Duffy, when insisting he would declassify the 9/11, JFK, and Epstein files to restore some lost trust in the American institutions, he just said, yes. Trump also said he has two names in mind for potential AG picks, but he said he made mistakes with a critical decision during his first term, obvious references to Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr. Two absolutely terrible people, by the way. Trump's legal team has vowed to appeal his conviction, putting it on the hands of the New York Appeals Court and potentially beyond. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. But let's get some of the reaction here. Palm says theories, and Mark says Lindsey Graham said he did and enjoyed it when they shocked his "Oh my God, Graham, go away." Somebody's got a car battery and some nipple clamps. All right. There are 4 people watching live right now. So the viewership of The View is about to go up by 300%. Based on clips given by the Daily Wire. I felt like I won. The View hosts are absolutely giddy as they celebrate the Trump verdict. I want to know which one of these Daily Wire writers, by the way, is the one who draws the short straw that has to sit and watch The View every day to see what it is that they say. Do they rotate, do you think, or do you think it's just one every single time? This one is from Virginia Kruta. The hosts of The View could not contain their excitement as they celebrated the conviction in Manhattan. Everyone around the table, including the 2 who professed to be Republicans, had something to say about the outcome, and none of them appeared concerned, even as some CNN analysts were that DA Alvin Bragg or Juan Merchan had potentially overstepped in bringing the case in the first place. So, let's hear what some of them had to say. Looks like we've got 6 clips. Yeah, 6 clips. Starting with Whoopi.
Donald John Trump.
Don't tell me.
Is a convicted felon. Now, yesterday, a New York jury found him guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in order to hide a sex scandal that would hurt his 2016 presidential campaign, and that's what the problem was.
The crime.
That's why he was in court, because he did that. He did that. And then, of course, he played the victim outside of the courtroom.
Ignoring the fact that Bragg campaigned on getting Trump to come hell or high water, Whoopi proclaims he was in the courtroom because of what he did. He was convicted here in New York because New York brought him to trial.
Again, I'm just going to repeat. He was in that courtroom because of what he did.
Right, yeah.
And those jurors were chosen by both sides.
Yes, they were. Right.
He was convicted here in New York because New York brought him to trial. This was not a Biden thing. This was, had he just paid the money, he'd have been fine. If he had tried to sneak some checks and stuff around, he'd have been fine, but he didn't do that. Instead, he was cheap, and that's what you get.
Yeah, that's also not what happened, but... Full conservative Alyssa Farah Griffin said she feared for the safety of the judge and the jury, and I hope they had security. See, well, let's listen to this first, and then I'll go on to my rant.
And my first thought, honestly, was I feared for the safety of the judge and the jury, and I hoped that they had security. We live in a moment of political, violent rhetoric that I think is very dangerous.
See that? That is why I said that questioning the results of this trial could possibly become a bannable offense somewhere in the future, to which YouTube would retroactively go back and retro-ban you, even if it was not against the rules at the time that you said it. Because of the safety of the judge and the jurors. Anna Navarro says her reaction to the verdict was schizophrenic.
I really felt and still feel like I'm in a surrealist Fellini movie. Is this really happening? And I was schizophrenic because part of me was like, yay! And part of me was like, you know what? This is really serious. Yay! This is really serious. Now, this is a man, yay! This is a man who made my life a living hell for 4 years, has made the life of our country a living hell for 6 years, and so he deserves to be accountable. He has been Teflon Don his entire life. He has been getting away with cheating and lying and doing things and, you know, criminal acts for all this time.
Yeah, they're too excited for that one. Let's grab these last two from Sarah Haynes and Sunny Hostin.
I'm trying to be open and honest and teach him how to have his own opinions and things. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, thank God he asked me on Saturday or Sunday. Because to sit here as a parent or a teacher or an auntie or any other leader in this and try to explain to your child that someone who could not vote in this country because they are a convict could run and rule the country. He understands criminal. He understands jail. He understands policemen. If you say this man is doing this and then try to explain how it's possible, more questions are coming, and I don't know if I'm ready for them, but it's scary.
Well, it's pretty simple because there's no constitutional mechanism to prevent a felon from running for president. And staunchly racist Sunny Hostin says after the verdict, she felt like the Knicks won the tournament. I felt like America won. I felt like I won.
I didn't feel somber. I felt like the Knicks won the tournament. I felt like America won.
Yep.
I felt like New York won. I felt like the Manhattan DA's office won. I felt like I won. For me, I think that this jury took 9 hours to come back, which some people think that's a really long time. It actually is not, because he was facing 34 counts. And to your point, Whoopi, this was an easy case.
Of course it was an easy case, because they were told going into this, hey, we know who all of you are. We've all seen your face. We know what your last names are, your addresses are, and what your families are. Wouldn't it be a shame if you came back and said not guilty and some of the news media found out about that? And I don't think it's out of the question either, because remember that NBC reporter got popped running a red light in Kenosha over by the Cousin Subs, trying to tail the bus that was bringing the jurors back to their cars, which were stored off-site. Far off-site, by the way. Especially if they were already all the way over by the Cousin Subs. So, and realistically, and I do apologize for making you listen to all 5 of these women, but realistically, the reason for doing so was the fact that, and I've been looking at X for a little bit since the verdict came in, is that it very well summarized the sentiment that's coming from the people on the ground. Many of them who are finding out what to think about politics from listening to these people, to these 5 women. A lot of the posts that you see on X are copy-pastes of the quotes that we just heard here, even though some of them had absolutely nothing to do with what was happening with this. All right, another one from the Associated Press, this time talking about the sentencing, how Trump's deny everything strategy could hurt him at sentencing. I'm just going to go over this one briefly from Eric Tucker. Trump has had plenty to say since his hush money trial conviction last week, which I hate to tell you this, but his lawyers probably smoke severely. He has claimed that his case was... Still can't say that one on YouTube. Well, I can, but I know that if, for some reason, they would try to come back out and say, hey, you've caused us a problem, questioning the narrative, have a strike, then I'd have to go back to the backup channel for a week. linked Biden as the state prosecution. No, that's not what he did either, by the way. Called the star witness against him a sleazebag, which, where's the lie in that? And said the judge was highly conflicted. What he hasn't done is utter any variation of the words that might benefit him the most come sentencing next time next month. I'm sorry. It's a truism of the criminal justice system that defendants hoping for lenient treatment at their sentencing are expected to take responsibility for their actions, even express remorse, but it flies in the face of Trump's longtime refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing, a tone that he often strikes to portray strength and present himself as a fighter under ceaseless attack. While the strategy may resonate with his most loyal political supporters, it failed during his New York criminal trial and could complicate his legal team's efforts to avoid a tough sentence. So, you guys know I'm not a big fan of Shapiro, but I suck up my pride, I swallow my disdain, and I listen to him, especially if there's something that is expressly in the legal sentiment. Mr. Zed is back with us. I think Mr. Zed's been popping on and off for a while on Instagram, because I see the view counter go up and then I see it go down, and I don't see any new names on there. But when there's something especially illegal, I do sit and listen to Shapiro, because despite his faults, which he has many, he is a Harvard-trained lawyer. So I do concede that under the legal side of things, he knows what he's talking about. And he's brought up the fact, I think he was one of the first ones to bring up the fact that for Trump, for sentencing, to have some sort of, to display, not necessarily have, but to display some sort of remorse. Typically on sentencing hearings, if you have some sort of remorse to the judge, they come back and say, all right, just don't do it again, and we'll give you this reduced sentence to this, that, the next thing. And like, I know people in my family have actually done that with traffic tickets. I don't. I send my lawyer in for those. But like, my one cousin, my oldest cousin, when he was 19, I think, 18 or 19, got popped going through a small town near Kenosha. He was keeping up with the flow of traffic, but he got still popped for speeding with that. And, you know, even they were saying when we were talking about that, it was like right in the middle of a family gathering. And a lot of my aunts and uncles just said, well, yeah, I mean, if you go to court and you just say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to happen, it won't happen again, and do the platitudes, they'll knock a little bit off your fine and take some points off of it. Like I said, I just let my lawyer go back and take care of that myself, but they don't make it go away. They just knock a few bucks off it and take a point or two off of your penalty. But what Ben was saying was, for the Donald, and Ben himself is fully convinced, anti-Trump Ben is full out convinced of the fact that there was no crime here to even try. And I hate to recommend that you go listen to Ben Shapiro. But he put out an impromptu podcast for Friday night, Thursday night, right after the conviction came in. If you want to know the legality of it coming from a Harvard lawyer, I recommend that you go listen to that feed, because it doesn't do any other news out of it. And he, again, as Harvard trained, can explain it much, much better than I can. And yes, if you get ear bleed from hearing, okay, gang, go buy your Birch Gold and your MeUndies and everything else, okay, gang? If you get ear bleed from that, I apologize. But he does bring up a good point. I mean, there's no crime to be remorseful for. Falsification of business records is a misdemeanor that was well past the statute of limitations. Crime was allegedly found out in 2017, statute of limitations, because it's 2 years, ran out in 2019, and yet it didn't start getting tried until 2023 on a novel legal theory that it was an improper campaign finance violation, sidestepping the fact that candidates can put however much of their own money they want into a campaign, But because it was technically a contribution from Michael Cohen, that means that Trump can turn around and be tried for it as a felony without having being charged for the felony. It is a very specious legal theory. And I don't know if it holds up in appeal. Now, going back to The View, our friends on the left want to see a lockup, but realistically, I think our friends on the left want to see Secret Service protection stripped away because, well, let's face it, they've been talking about JFKing him since he came down the golden escalator. If Trump isn't locked up, it gives anyone permission to shoot people on Fifth Avenue. I'm not going to do the video off of this. I'm just going to comment on the terrible irony that not much further away from Fifth Avenue in Midtown, people are getting shot, or people are shooting other people with impunity. Alright, let's see. She sounds like Ed's AOC impression. Okay, puppy. Still want to know what we did wrong to have this. Made us listen to Whoopi twice. Is it my alcohol? Are we being punished because I made alcohol? No, not at all. That's Palm's jar, by the way. Palm made that one. Behind me. Have a lucky strike. Alright. So let's go on the Supreme Court intervention. Let's see what's going on with that. From Axios, this is from today. Trump calls on Supreme Court to intervene in hush money case. From Soreen Habashian. Former President Trump called on the Supreme Court on Sunday to intervene after he was found guilty on all counts in his New York criminal trial. The nation's highest court can only get involved if some element of the appeal relates to the Constitution or federal law, which doesn't appear to be the case. Now, see, I actually have questions about that myself, especially given the statute of limitations having run out and the upgrade to felony charges over the crimes of somebody else. What he's saying, the sentencing for not having done anything wrong will be conveniently for the fascists 4 days before the RNC. Until I get a feel of what the rules are going to be from YouTube, I'm going to skip that one. Trump's comments come after Mike Johnson called for the Supreme Court to step in and overturn the verdict. Johnson's comments are one of the starkest examples yet of a furious Republican calling for intervention to protect their presumed presidential candidate. Trump's legal team said they plan to appeal the verdict, which can only happen after sentencing next month. They would have to go through New York appellate courts before any chance of reaching the U.S. Supreme Court, and that is correct. Daily Wire following up on this one, saying that Trump has demanded his verdict go straight to the Supreme Court for review. From Hank Berrien. On Sunday night, former President Trump, who a New York jury found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records in a trial that was seen as many as a legal travesty, demanded that the Supreme Court review the conviction. Mark Levine broached the idea of going straight to America's highest court. Almost immediately after the verdict was announced on Thursday, Juan Merchan said Trump would be sentenced 4 days before the RNC, which is set to begin on July 15th. On Thursday, Levine wrote on X, "The issue is how to get out of the New York system and bring the case to the Supreme Court, which may or may not take it up. That's why I looked at the Bush versus Gore, where the Supreme Court decided to step in because it was a presidential election. There was another court involved, the Florida Supreme Court. And it was that court that the Supreme Court believed was violating the Equal Protection Clause. There was doctrine it settled on given the unequal treatment of voters. In New York, you would file the notice of appeal, ask for a stay of the trial court, and seek expedited review. You need to protect your ability to timely appeal and not abandon it. You might then file applications for common law writs with the U.S. Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court can take action if it chooses, and legitimately claim the harm was immediate and ongoing, not just to a presidential campaign, but to the federal electoral system. Federal campaign jurisdiction, reverse federalism, and the president that might otherwise be set and spread throughout the country. So Levine brings up a good point with this, but I don't believe still the Supreme Court would take this up directly without going through at least one New York appeals court. And the reason that I say that is, number one, because this does have to wait until after sentencing, because this is a criminal trial. Like it or not, you have not been harmed by the government until you have officially been sentenced and began your sentence. That's number one. But number two, it would, just like the way that the law was applied in this trial by using the crime of somebody else, it is a novel legal theory that Levine has brought up, and it has legs. It does. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that Mark Levine is blowing smoke up your ass for this. It has some legs because of the fact that, number one, Alvin Bragg ran on I'm going to go and get Trump, and number two, it is a DA of an opposite political party levying charge against one of his chief political rivals. It's possible, but it's a stretch. Because you would have to show somebody other than Trump being aggrieved by this. And I don't know if the burden of proof is there for the Supreme Court to bypass the New York Appellate Court. In spite of the fact that I would see the New York Appellate Court as being also politically motivated. I would like to see, though, how this would play out if they were to do something like this. This actually does have my attention. How it turns out, I have no idea. But we're going to continue to watch this one. Let's grab one from NPC News. Speaking of the Supreme Court. Stop eating the mic so much every time you do your Trump impression. Alright, this is from MSNBC, so you know that this is completely objective. Alito's non-recusal in the January 6th case cannot be ignored. Jordan Rubin reporting on this one. Sam Alito last week tried to rationalize his failure to recuse himself from January 6 related cases. Unfortunately, his explanation hasn't become more persuasive with time, as key rulings are due from the High Court on Trump's criminal immunity and obstruction charges against January 6 defendants more broadly, which could affect Trump's case. In fact, one of his former law clerks took to the op-ed pages of the Philadelphia Inquirer on Sunday to argue for his recusal. Flying the flag upside down at your home is more than a hint of political impropriety. It irrefutably calls into question impartiality and bias towards the former president, wrote Susan Sullivan, a professor who clerked for Alito when he was a judge on the Philadelphia-based 3rd U.S. Court of Appeals. Sullivan noted that she's a progressive liberal who often admired Alito as a person who for his integrity and honesty. However, well-reasoned her thoughts are, the justice would likely dismiss them due to her politics. He wrote in letters to congressional Democrats last week, I am confident that a reasonable person who is not motivated by political or ideological considerations or desire to affect the outcome of the Supreme Court cases would conclude that the events recounted above do not meet the applicable standard for recusal. What this boils down to, if our friends on the left get their way, the Supreme Court decision is 3-1 at that point. The makeup is 3-1. If they get what it is that they're trying to get to out of this. What I mean by that is they're doing their damnedest to get every hurdle out of the way to try to make this into a binding Supreme Court decision that's decided by liberals. The first demand, of course, is Kavanaugh, Coney Barrett, and Gorsuch all recuse themselves because they're all appointed by Trump. And I'll admit that that has a little bit of legs to it. Also, mind you, if one of them were to stray, which they do often, they would suddenly be lauded as heroes for the left, and they'd be so glad that they didn't recuse themselves from the cases. But I digress on political theories. But they also want Thomas and Alito out for tangential, what's the word I'm looking for? I had a word in here and I don't remember what it was. Not tangential access. Tangential involvement with their wives' support for Trump. And that I don't see as coming to the level of recusal. But what it really boils down to is that they want the only people that are deciding this to be John Roberts, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan, which has a legitimate top chance of being a 4-0 decision. Because Justice Roberts is kind of squishy. Alright, what else do we have? The reaction. Let's do some of the reaction stuff for this. From The Hill. Trump campaign touts $141 million raised in May, boosted by guilty verdict. From Brett Samuels. Did you guys... Did you donate? The Trump campaign announced Monday it raised $141 million in May alongside RNC. A staggering total buoyed in part by the surge in donations after the former president was found guilty on 34 felony counts in New York. The campaign and the RNC received more than 2 million donations for the month, and 25% of those who gave were first-time donors. On top of the $141 million haul for the campaign, other organizations supporting Trump brought in roughly $150 million, Trump officials said. Were moved by the outpouring of support for President Trump, senior advisor Chris LaCivita and Susan Wiles said in a statement. President Trump raised $141 million this month because Americans remember the roaring economy, secured border, and peace through strength at home and abroad under Trump. And we will return to prosperity and success when he's reelected in November, the two added. More than a third of Trump's fundraising total for May, $53 million, came via online donations in the 24 hours after the jury found him guilty. The massive total is likely to close the cash gap between Trump and the Biden campaign, which is yet to report its May fundraising numbers. Biden's campaign raised $51 million in April and had $192 million on hand. Trump's campaign outraised Biden in April, but it was still millions of dollars behind in terms of cash on hand. Well, right, because Biden can campaign from the Rose Garden. The one person in the Biden admin that cannot get a Hatch Act violation. Trump campaign officials have downplayed the Biden's campaign cash advantage, asserting that the former president and his team will have the resources required to win in November. So, how much exactly? Let's ask the Daily Wire. Trump raised a staggering sum of cash in 24 hours since the verdict. From Ryan Saavedra. Trump has raised more than $50 million after a guilty verdict was reached against him in a highly controversial trial in New York. In the 24 hours since crooked Joe Biden and his New York henchmen got their sham trial verdict, the Trump campaign has raised $52.8 million through the online digital fundraising platform, the campaign said in a statement. That's more than $2 million per hour With more than a third of these donors being new to the campaign, it is clear that more and more Americans are seeing through the Biden election interference and joining President Trump, your favorite president, in the movement to save our nation, the statement said. Team Trump Xing out, total raised in 24 hours after Biden sham trial. $52.8 million. Well, Palm is also not here, so do keep that in mind. And I would not ever say to do DoorDash, because it's expensive. CNN's legal expert dismantled the DA's criminal case this week against former President Trump, saying the prosecutors only brought the case to get Trump. Ali Honig, a former federal and state prosecutor, wrote in a newsletter on Friday that just because the jury convicted Trump does not mean that justice was carried out, because the case should have never been brought. Yeah, and that's the same position that Shapiro took as well. So. And what happens when you raise $2 million in an hour? Or per hour, I should say. From Axios, Trump campaign's donation site crashes after guilty verdict. Yes, this is their answer to Act Blue, which takes in money and then relaunders it out to the races that they think that they can win. From Rebecca Falconer. Oh, please let me say I'm still on. I just saw my number drop. Oh, we're still on, according to Restream. If I see that number drop from 5 to 0, I always have to go back and double check and make sure we're still on. Yep, everything is still going. All right. Former President Trump's fundraising page temporarily crashed after he was found guilty of all 34 counts. The WinRed donation platform used by Trump's 2024 campaign and other Republicans was hit by an outage as Google searches for Donald Trump's donation site, and other related searches spiked in the wake of the verdict. Yeah, that's where Vaughn can come and tell us that it got boomered. Yeah, because, I mean, my counter on my chat is showing all platforms at once. And yeah, it dropped from 5 to 0 temporarily. Now it's back up to 1. The American people see through crooked Biden's. Oh, that's Trump voice. The American people see right through crooked Joe Biden's rigged show trial. The Trump campaign said on X about the New York State case just before 6 p.m. I'm a little bit surprised that WinRed hasn't been able to beef up some of their infrastructure. All right, Doug Burgum getting in on this one here. I kind of like Doug Burgum. I could see him being the vice president. From CBS News, Governor Burgum, a potential Trump running mate, says the election is not going to turn on this trial. From Kaya Hubbard. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, considered to be one of the contenders to be Trump's running mate, said Sunday that November's election will not be decided by the former president's guilty conviction in the New York hush money trial. While this is interesting and it's captivating right now to a lot of people, the election is not going to turn on this trial. Burgum said on Face the Nation on Sunday. As this moment in time passes, we have the election coming up. People are going to make the decision about are they better off today than they were 4 years ago, Burgum said, noting Americans already had a chance to live their lives under a Trump admin. Americans are going to come back to the issues that affect them because this trial outcome doesn't affect them. The inflation affects them, which is a very fair point to all of this. The Daily Wire taking this a little bit further. Burgum says Americans will vote on issues that affect them like inflation, not Trump's trial. Let's listen.
Dragged in front
If
of
they
the
were
court.
running for president and changing those business records to obscure donations to their own campaign, you know what I'm saying. This isn't just filing error.
Well,
But
I hear what you're saying, but most Americans cannot explain it. Many of the
Sure,
legal
it's
experts,
complicated.
many of
Sure.
the legal experts that stood on the curb outside the courthouse for 6 weeks can't explain it. So Americans are going to come back to the issues that affect them because this trial outcome doesn't affect them. The inflation affects them.
it does. And I want to talk about some of those issues more in depth with you in a few minutes. We just put up a graph to show you our polling. It's 2/3 of those polled said they are watching closely.
And Burgum brings up the perfect point on this. So last year, due to a major groundswell of overtime, my wages went, I'm not going to say what I made last year or the year before, but I made $16,000 more last year than I did the year before. And I feel like I am in the exact same place. Maybe a little bit worse off than I was in 2022. Because I can get about the same amount of groceries. Keto was a little bit more of a struggle because I've been starting to phase out some of my high carb food and phase into my freezer some of the lower carb options. And remembering what the price used to be and thinking it was outrageous when I had to go back and come home with $50 worth of groceries for just me. And now that same cart of groceries is pushing 65 to 70. And that's what people are going to see when they go to the polls. If anything, yes, they can come back and yell and scream and cry, convicted felon, all that they want. They might have shot their wad a little bit too early on this. Because the American people have 5 more months of going to the grocery store. And remembering what it was like in 2019. And yes, I will use that as my benchmark, not 2020, because there was a lot of effort to make it look like the economy was crashing at that point. People are going to remember what houses cost in 2019, 2018. And what it was like when you could go get a mortgage for like 1.5%. People are going to remember when rent on a 1-bedroom was $400, not $800. These are the things that people are going to remember. I want to touch just a bit on the jury instructions coming into this, which were pretty well breaking as we were live on Tuesday. So we did talk about them a bit at the time, but we've got an end run coming from NBC, Newsweek, and the Associated Press telling us, oh, well, of course it all had to be unanimous. And I mean, some of that is because it came back unanimous. These articles were all written after the fact, after the verdict came in. So let's do the fact check here to see what they use for source material. I will admit I didn't see the jury instructions, and I did comment on some of the X posts about them, but I did not see them myself. Yeah, you probably could. Post misrepresent New York judges' instructions to jury in Trump hush money trial. From Melissa Golden, published 3:04 p.m. on May 29th. Which was... Okay, so this was right before the verdict. Claim New York Judge Juan Merchan told the jury in former President Trump's hush money trial that they didn't need a unanimous verdict to convict Trump. False. Merchan said to convict Trump, the jury will have to find unanimously on each of the 34 counts that he falsified business records, and that he did so with the intent of concealing another crime, in this case of violating a state election law during his 2016 campaign. The judge said jurors should consider 3 different ways the law may have been broken, and that they don't have to be unanimous on this decision. As jury deliberations began on Wednesday in Trump's trial, social media users spread false information about Merchan's instructions to the 7 men and 5 women who will determine the outcome. An X post reads, Merchan told the judge that they did not need unanimity to convict. They do not have to all agree on what occurred. 4 can agree on one crime, 4 on a different one, and 4 on another. He will treat this as a 4-4-4's unanimous verdict. So, again, myself, I did not see the initial instructions for this. I heard that one after the fact from everybody else. The point that I'm getting to, and I do think that it was a bit spurious the way that the jury instructions went, was that once again, you're finding unfalsified business records, which would have been long since past the statute of limitations, over a crime that wasn't charged. But they still have to come back and decide whether or not that one was charged, whether or not that was guilty, even though it wasn't charged. Alright, let's do some more blowback here. Where are we at for time, by the way? 1:17. Hey, we might get to another news story yet today. Alright, from Politico. Trump attorney spars with ABC host over bias. This, of course, is George Snuffleupagus, a former Clinton campaign staffer and press secretary. But don't worry, I'm sure he's totally objective. Palm is causing trouble. Well, like I said, that the more chats show up, the more we get pushed out to the front page. So, David Cohen reporting. Will Sharp, an attorney for former President Trump, insisted Sunday that the Biden admin was firmly behind Trump's prosecution, even as George Snuffleupagus pushed back on that idea. Speaking this week, Sharp responded to Snuffleupagus saying, "Of course, AG of Manhattan has nothing to do with the Department of Justice," by arguing in response, "I vehemently disagree that the DA in New York was not politically motivated, and I vehemently disagree that Biden and his political allies aren't up to their necks in prosecution." Snuffleupagus answered, "There's no evidence of that, sir. I'm not going to let you continue to say that. There's zero evidence of that." Guess what? I dug up the video of that one. Paul Zibula says President Trump attorney Will Sharp just went on ABC to rightfully call the hush money trial. Can't say that one, and Snuffleupagus wouldn't let him speak. Let's listen.
And of course, the Attorney General in Manhattan has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. Finally, what do you expect from the sentencing process?
I vehemently disagree that the district attorney in New York was not politically motivated here, and I vehemently disagree that President Biden and his political allies aren't up to their necks in this prosecution. I think the fact
There's
that
no
the Biden
evidence of that,
campaign
sir. There's no. I'm not going to let you continue to say that. There's just zero evidence of that.
Well, how about the
DA
fact
in
that Matthew
Manhattan is
Colangelo was standing over Alvin Bragg's shoulder when he announced this verdict? I mean, Colangelo was the #3 official in the Biden Department of Justice who suddenly disappears and shows up as an assistant district attorney right as Trump's case in New York starts to proceed.
After
you want
the
to talk about
decision was made,
you want to talk about political coordination?
This has nothing
George,
to do.
right
This
there
has
in front
nothing
of
to do. No, it's not. This has nothing to do with President Biden. Do you want to answer the question about the sentencing process or not?
I completely disagree that this has nothing to do with President Biden. With respect to sentencing, as I said before, we're going to vigorously challenge this case on appeal. I don't think President Trump is going to end up being subject to any sentence whatsoever, and we look forward to getting this case into the next court and taking this again all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary to vindicate President Trump's rights.
So, and Sharp brought up good points with this, but of course it goes against the narrative, so they're all going to get cut off and shut off, and it's fun. All right, let's keep with this here. We've got our first new round of polling coming in. NPC News reporting what first polls after Trump's conviction show and don't show. From Mark Murray, this one we are going to be on for just a little bit. News organizations and pollsters released multiple snap surveys over the weekend to gauge the political landscape after a New York jury convicted former President Trump on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Here are 5 key takeaways from what the different national surveys told us and didn't tell us after the historic verdict. Now, keep in mind, there is probably not enough yet at this point to aggregate. So these are going to be single polls, and, well, it's NBC, so I would probably think that they are going to be cherry-picked at some point. I don't want to feel sorry for his wife either, but that's for a different reason. Palm says, is the guy's name actually Snuffleupagus? No, that's just been a running joke since I started analyzing politics. No, it's Stephanopoulos, and he was a Clinton press secretary and staffer before he got his job at ABC. And yes, I feel sorry for his wife, but not for the same reason that you are. A CBS News YouGov poll showed that 57% of adults said the jury in Trump's trial reached the correct verdict. Why don't you get an aggregate instead of using a single poll? That finding was backed by a Morning Consult poll, which 54% of registered voters said they approved of the verdict, as well as an ABC Ipsos, in which 50% of adults said the verdict was correct. Well, those 2 outside ones, you can probably just throw out, because they just went down and found 50 people who looked like they were, or I'm sorry, 1,000 people who looked like they were over 18 and asked them. But the middle one is worth having a look at because that was actual registered voters, which meant that they had to show some sort of paperwork to show that they were registered to vote in their district in order to be included in it. Republicans remain firmly behind Trump. The headline of a Reuters Ipsos poll released Saturday stated that 1 in 10 Republicans said they are less likely to vote for Trump after the verdict, but a fair warning, those voters were in the clear minority of their party. In the same poll, 55% of Republicans said the verdict didn't make a difference to their vote, and 34% said it made them more likely to vote for Trump. See, 19% of independents, or all voters rather, said that it would bring them more likely. The no difference is, I mean, that's a stark number in and of itself. But 19% of all voters And 16% of independents are the numbers to sit back and watch. Especially with a lopsided amount who are more likely in the Republican Party. I'll admit, what's happened here has swayed me more in the Trump direction. I'm still not completely sold, but I'm a little bit more in the Trump direction after this. The overall political environment hasn't changed much. Swing voters seem to support Trump's conviction. While the overall political environment appears to be unchanged, these numbers from the ABC News Ipsos poll bear watching. A slight majority of independents believe that the verdict was correct and that Trump should end his candidacy. And it's still very early. It's important to keep in mind snap polls conducted after a historic event, like the first former American president to be found guilty of a criminal charge, might not always be the best indicators of what's likely to come. And that is indeed a salient point to make. What I mean by that, and what NBC actually means by that too, I believe that they're going the same direction with this, is the fact that we still have, like I said during the Burgum interview, 5 months of people going to the grocery store, wondering if they can go buy a new home in the midst of all this, looking at the tires on their car and wondering if they can afford to throw 4 more tires on it, wondering how bad that water pump is going to leak for the next however long until their next paycheck, what to do when the exhaust falls off, or, you know, if somebody plows into their house, if they can make the repair, or anything else, any number of other things that affect normal everyday Americans. And I feel like they're going to make their decision more based on that than what happened here. You don't know what happened to Vaughn. Like I say, it just, the counter on the main side dropped to next to nothing. It dropped to 0 briefly, and then it jumped back up to 1. And then I got a little bit of lurk over on the Rumble side. No chatter over on the Rumble side, but a little bit of lurk. From CBS, some black Americans find irony in Trump's reaction to his conviction in a New York trial. Funny, nobody wanted to put their name behind this one. No author given. As Trump lambasted the guilty verdict of his hush money trial, he stood inside a Manhattan courthouse that was the site of one of the most notorious examples of injustice in recent New York history, and he had a part in it. It's the same courthouse where 5 black and Latino youths were wrongly convicted 34 years ago in the beating and rape of a white female jogger. The former president famously took out a newspaper ad in New York City in the aftermath of the 1989 attack, calling for the execution of the accused in the case that roiled racial tensions locally, and that many point to as evidence of a criminal justice system prejudice against defendants of color. Some black Americans found irony in Trump railing against what he called injustice of his own conviction, and in a courthouse where the Central Park Five were wrongly convicted in a case that Trump supported vociferously. The case was Trump's first foray into tough-on-crime politics that preluded his full-throated populist political persona. To many, Trump employed dog whistles as well as overtly racist rhetoric in both chapters of his public life. Yeah, that's a load of crap. But they're going to continue to spout that. Alright, now I'm going to start weighing in on some of the stuff. So, right after the verdict, this was on May 30th, I found out about the verdict at, what was it? Palm, I was talking to you at the time. Probably about 4 I stayed to work late that night. So probably about 4:45, and by 5:04, here's a reminder from yesterday, which I had posted on this before the verdict came down as well. Do not go to Manhattan. Do not protest. Do not demonstrate. At this point, do not even gather. When we have, especially in a recency bias of something like this, and there have already been fat-sounding calls to get people up, gathered into one area, as part of a peaceful demonstration. And then suddenly somebody's going to say, hey, here's a brick, I'm going to be standing right next to you. Why don't you just throw that and let out your anger? Don't worry, I'll be standing right next to you. Hey, let's go back and let's run into this government building that's the source of all your problems, in this case probably the courthouse. Oh, don't you want to break a window? Hey, I happen to have this flagpole here that I sharpened. You want to take this when we go into this building? And of course, our friends on the left are calling out saying, oh, I knew that Republicans were do nothing. Yeah, you think you were going to protest and you didn't do anything. Our news media would love nothing more than a report on Republican-led political violence. Don't give that to them. Take it out of the ballot box. Now, as far as Maxine Waters goes, Maxine Waters says domestic terrorist Trump supporters should be investigated for civil war. I knew I was going to bring up a clip here before we went live. Let me see if I can find video of that one. Yep, right there. So I'll remind you before we read this one that this is the same person who said this. I can't believe CNN hasn't scrubbed this yet in light of the fact that what she's saying now. Oh, they have scrubbed it. Let's see if I can refresh that and get it to play. Hold on, I can fix this. On-air production. There it is. Hey, the Washington Post has it up still too. They haven't scrubbed this one yet either.
Children, we can't protect anybody. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome. The people are going to turn on them. They're going to protest. They're going to...
So, that person said this. Marie Delorde says, Maxine Waters says domestic terrorist Trump supporters should be investigated for civil war. Let's listen.
I am going to spend some time with the criminal justice system, with the justice system, asking them, tell us what's going on with the domestic terrorists. Are they preparing a civil war against us? Should we be concerned about our safety? What is he doing with this divisive language? It is dangerous, and we're going to have to make sure that we understand that we're not at risk with this man talking in the way that he's doing.
and launching a new conspiracy theory about Trump supporters training up in the hills for a coordinated attack. This was earlier on in the month.
This is a man who we better be careful about. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask the Justice Department and I'm going to ask the President to tell us what they're going to do to protect this country against violence if he loses. I want to know about all of those right-wing organizations that he's connected with who are training up in the hills somewhere and targeting, what communities they're going to attack.
But again, same person.
Let's stay the course. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Terrorist Trump supporters investigated for potential civil war. Maxine Waters, everyone. But we are seeing some of the issues coming out with this, of course. Cohen's family doxxed after a Trump guilty verdict in porn star hush money case. Now, mind you, we already know who Michael Cohen is. I will say this right off the bat. Do not go after family. That is bad. You're an asshole if you do this. Although I've got some funny feeling, especially with my thoughts on gathering and protesting, and what might happen if the person next to you promises he'll be next to you throwing the brick, and then suddenly mysteriously disappears. Whether or not the person who leaked the family names and the addresses of the family members of Cohen was getting high fives at his desk at out in Langley today. As people said, "Ha! They bought it." Ryan J. Riley reporting the addresses and phone numbers of former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen's family members were posted to a doxing website. After presumptive Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump was convicted of 34 felonies in connection with a scheme to illegally influence the 2016 election. No, that is not what any of this was about. Trump has denied the affair, was convicted of falsifying business records. Phone numbers and addresses for Cohen's wife and children were posted early Monday morning on a site that's been used to target other figures involved in Trump's various legal issues, according to the group Advanced Democracy, a nonprofit research group. So they know exactly where this place is, and it's still up and running. Nobody's gone after their internet provider like they do in other cases. They just let this thing continue to exist, do they? That's weird. Because usually stuff like that gets shut down. Pretty quickly, in fact. Some more of the aftermath from the Associated Press. Trump's fans' bus loaded with MAGA merchandise crashes in New York City. We're not a serious country anymore. No author given. A man and a woman who sold pro-Trump merchandise out of a bus covered with pro-Trump flags and posters are homeless after the vehicle crashed into several street signs and utility poles on New York City. I don't consider this to be foul play. I would more consider this to be a mechanical failure, even in New York. And I'm pretty sure I've seen this bus in Waukesha, because I think that they were out there selling stuff there too. Donna Iden, who has been living in the bus with her husband Rocky Granada and their cat Missy, told the Staten Island Advance that she was sleeping inside the parked vehicle when it began to roll along Highland Boulevard, crashing into signs and poles in its path. Photos of the crash's aftermath show the side of the bus ripped to shreds and Trump signs scattered about. That's our life. We live in it. We travel in it. I have my daughter's ashes in it. I told the advance. It's our business. It's our life. Iden had to be extracted from the vehicle. Firefighter said she did not require medical treatment. So, and that is a sad day. Although I will come out and say that if you're going to put your livelihood and the entirety of it in a vehicle, you should really have a backup place to live. Even if it's a crappy one-bedroom apartment in the middle of Alabama. For as cheap as you can get it, you've at least got a place to go back and put a roof back over your head. Also, that also adds the question to me is, what address was their business licensed at if they're not homeless? A lot of questions about that one. More Fed behavior. Maggots threatening the jurors and jurors' children. This is going to get so much worse, and the Mangolomaniac will revel in it. Once again, don't do this. But it's kind of funny that the website that has the jurors' names and addresses is still allowed to function. Hasn't even had a DDoS attack. It's weird.
And he was found guilty. Holy fucking shit. I told you. Holy fucking shit. Motherfuckers! Motherfuckers! You suck. You suck. There is no justice in this country.
Guilty!
Not guilty.
Not
He's
guilty,
not guilty.
motherfucker.
You piece of shit. Motherfucker! He's shit and die. You're fucking corrupt.
Your fucking kids are all dead. Your kids are all fucking dead.
Shit.
All your
Feds.
fucking children, they're all
Feds.
fucking
Found guilty.
dead. They're all
Feds.
fucking dead.
Yeah.
Feds.
Motherfucker.
Feds.
Fucking piece of shit.
Fed. Fed. Fed, 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 fed. Chaos outside the courthouse as Trump flasher rips sign out of protesters' hands. Now this one, Vong says is a Fed. And they did a very, very poor blur job, so fortunately rather, for all of us, I'm not going to scroll down to where the boobs are. But they're in there. This article, I think this article, either that or the X that it's linked to, is in the Discord if you want to see them for yourselves. Oh, going back to the Maxine Waters thing. What was she trying to tell them they weren't welcome for being associated with Trump? This was back in 2017, right after the inauguration, like a few days after the inauguration. Somehow I found 9 lurkers on Rumble and no chatters. Don't be shy, you guys. Chaos briefly erupted across the Manhattan courthouse where jurors in Trump's hush money trial were deliberating Thursday when a supporter for the former president snatched signs out of protesters' hands. Okay, that one's safe. Juliet Germanata, a pro-Trump activist who flashed his motorcade on Wednesday, yelled "transsexuals for Trump" as she grabbed the "Do you hear Trump lying" signs from the woman protesting inside Colette Pond Park. "Knock her down. Get out of here, bitch," another Trump fan yelled at the sign holder as the two grappled. And, well, that appears to be it. I don't want to go too far because I know that they're... Yep, that's that one right there. They're blurred boobs, but they're Not blurred enough that I don't think I could get through YouTube TOS. Also, from Palm in the chat, before we move on for a bit, Fauci was testifying on Capitol Hill today over his involvement in the Wuhan biolab and the research that was going on there. I did not put that onto the list today because, well, it's a bunch of MAGA-type Republicans who are going to come back and shout a bunch of accusations at Fauci. He's going to say, I don't remember any of that. No, I didn't do any of that. And nothing's going to be done about it. See, they drag him up in front of their committee every few months or so, demand answers for him. He doesn't give them answers, and then he walks away and does his own thing again. Rinse and fucking repeat. From my state, which will be hosting the RNC this year. Wisconsin Governor Evers declares an emergency for Republican National Convention. The governor's office says it's a standard part of the preparation and planning process and is aimed at helping make sure the necessary resources are available to respond to any potential emergencies. Now, on its surface, the way that Evers presented this is probably not too far off. And what I mean when I say that is the fact that, yes, you know you're going to be bringing in a lot of extra crowd. This is the third time the RNC, second or third time, I think it's the third time, that the RNC has been in Milwaukee. It tends to go off without a hitch for the most part. And there hasn't ever really been a state emergency called for it anytime that it's been done. Now, my issue with this, of course, and there's a tinfoil part of my head that comes in and pops up every time they come back and suddenly change something, especially when there is a very, very large story in the news that's going on with that. And that is the fact that Trump's sentencing will be 4 days before this, which is when all the vendors are going to start showing up, and a lot of your out-of-state guests are going to start showing up in Milwaukee for all this. And then I remember what happened when we had a large group of supporters listening to a certain speech in a park on the other side of the Supreme Court building. And then one break-off group in the middle of, while the former president was speaking, decided that they wanted to go take a tour of the Capitol at that very moment. It was a January morning in about 2021 when that all happened. And there have been questions. Again, I don't want to come back out and say a lot that'll get me banned, especially if the rules change somewhere in the near future. But there were questions about the involvement of certain government agencies in that little breakoff group that went and decided they had to have a tour of the Capitol at that very moment. Now, with the sentencing being only 4 days prior, I now suddenly have a few questions about whether or not there's going to be a breakaway group at the RNC who is suddenly irreparably upset about the sentencing, whatever it comes down to be. And this happened on Wednesday, right before the sentencing as well. What I will say about this is I was planning on seeing if I could find a way to get some time off and go down to the RNC convention. And, well, now I'm not going to be anywhere near it anymore. I am not going anywhere near that conference hall for the RNC convention. I'm not even going to be on that side of the state while it's happening. I'm going to watch it on TV with the rest of you. One last thing that I want to touch on before we head into things I like and things that I hate, because it is time to start closing. We're actually running a little bit long right now. Is this. And I thought about this over and over again. Now, I myself am anti-government. I've made that point very, very clear. I do think that our government is looking to strip more and more power away from the American people and centralize it into the hands of a few elite. I don't care for it, but that is what I legitimately believe. As they pass extensive laws, as they put more and more people in prison, and as they screw with the economy more and more and make it harder and harder for the little guy. There's been something that bothered me about this. Now, this is before any of the doxing came out, and I'm sure that the careers and the political leanings of all the jurors, once they're doxed, are going to come out and they're going to be all over 4chan, and we're going to know all kinds of things about them. Some of the things that we're probably not going to like. But in the deepest midst of all this, I posted this on the 31st. It said, no matter how many people tell you that it was 12 ordinary people, it wasn't. Now, running out of characters, I meant 12 ordinary people that put him in jail. You've got your DNC operatives who are trying to run this narrative. You've got the paid shills. You've got all the Democrat Congress people who are trying to tell you over and over again that this was just 12 ordinary people who did the conviction. And I've said, these are just elites trying to wrap up factional division among the little people. Because the more that we fight, and I wish we could unify our country more, I really do. The more that we fight, the more that we're at each other's throats, the more that we look upon the person with the mask, or the Joe Biden sticker, or the person with the MAGA hat, as our enemies, the easier it's going to be to go back and ask the government, to go back and put controls down to negatively affect the person with the mask or the Joe Biden pin or the person with the MAGA hat. Factional division among the little people gives the government more power. While 12 jurors did ultimately come out and make the conviction, I do see a situation where there was a lot of pressure for them to do so. They're in the middle of Manhattan. The DA and several of the news outlets have seen their faces. And they may have been told, hey, wouldn't it be a shame if this happened to little Timmy or little Sally? If you came out and couldn't make the right decision? I think you need to go back there and make the right decision. There may have even been one of them in the jury pool. There were rumors that were never confirmed that there was a person like that in the Chauvin jury pool who was able to come back out and say, I know about all your families, I know all your names, and if you don't give me the guilty verdict, I'm going to go back and put that out there. Never confirmed, but I know that was out there. Whereas the DA who ran on Get Trump, judge shopping for a man deeply entrenched in the Democratic machine, remember, Merchan's daughter, is a high-ranking member of Kamala Harris's campaign and a super PAC that supports Democrats. And there is, I don't know what the extent of the involvement is, but there is involvement with the Biden campaign, coordinating with Bragg to get this charge coming forward. The people are the people who are in the government, not the little guy. I don't want to watch it though. What were we watching? I don't remember. Oh, we got modded. We got botted than modded. Palm got to use the wrench and ban. All right. Well, that's all the news that I think we're going to get to today. We've got some foreign news that's going to have to push back until next week, and I will look into what happened with the New York Stock Exchange. I didn't hear about that today. I mean, while I was watching one of the videos, I looked up the news, and yeah, it looks like there was a glitch that caused Berkshire Hathaway to drop 99.9%. That's nuts. I'm going to read that after stream here. I didn't even see that today. And we'll talk, I'll save this stuff here. We'll talk about Joe Manchin next week. We'll talk about Kharkiv and foreign policy. There's a lot of stuff to go. And then I can put some stuff about Rafa on too, because I wasn't able to get to any of that today. But let's go into the close and let's look at a couple things that I like and a couple things that I hate. But first, of course, we are going to do the rules of acquisition. Which means I have to go back a page because I followed a link in my rules of acquisition page and see where we are at here. So we're going to go on to the third rule of acquisition, a fairly obvious one. From one of the Maquis episodes from DS9, which were some of my favorites, honestly. And I think that probably not this coming weekend, but the weekend after that, or maybe on Thursday. We'll see what happens with that and my new work schedule. But I think Palm might start watching DS9 and learn where the rules of acquisition come from. But our third rule of acquisition this week: the Ferengi rules of acquisition, the guidelines of the Ferengi religion on hypercapitalism. We go through one of these rules every week, and I tell you how it was used in the source material, if I know the source material, and how it gets used in real life. On the third rule of acquisition, never spend more for an acquisition than you have to. It's a fairly obvious one here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. If you can wheel and deal and work your way down on the price, then you're going to come out ahead. Never spend more than you have to, because you get more value out of it if it adds some sort of value to your life, or if you're going to turn around and resell it, you can make a bigger profit margin for yourself. This coming from the DS9 episode, the Maquis, part 2. On the B plot, I believe, was this one where Nog was able to find a shipment of bolts that were needed. Got them for relatively cheap and was going to try to resell them for a higher price. So, yeah, never spend more for an acquisition than you have to. All right, let's do a couple things that I like, and we'll do a couple things that I hate, and we'll be out of here for the night. Oh, the RNC. I want to watch it from a distance just to see if there suddenly happens to be a large protest that would just happen to break out in the middle of it, that would require the Wisconsin National Guard to step in and start cracking skulls. Alright, thing that I like, number one. We'll start politically, which I don't usually. Bill Maher rips left-wing outrage over appeal to heaven flag. Bill Maher is an interesting character because he's full-out left-wing, but he's like Union Democrat left-wing, so he's not full-out progressive, change every little kid's gender and redistribute all the wealth from one person. I mean, he's fairly wealthy himself, so he's not going to be into that. He's more of a let the workers bargain, let them rise up against their company, that kind of Democrat. And I know that he gets, he is far against the far leftoidism, big time. Let's read here. Comedian Bill Maher ripped left-wing backlash to the appeal to heaven flag after the New York Times, a former newspaper, used it to attack Sam Alito, claiming he flew the flag and that it was linked to the January 6th Selfie Fest. Maher noted that the city of San Francisco has since ordered the flag to be removed from outside of its city hall because, it was sitting outside of the San Francisco City Hall, oddly enough. Maher first said, "I found out now because you never get a full story from the first or from one source. This flag flies in a lot of places," Maher said. "They're saying Alito flew it as a dog whistle to stop the Steel people, to the MAGA nation, that this is their flag now. It means that we don't believe the election was fair, and it was flying over City Hall in San Francisco for 60 years. Then Maher noted that they took it down outside of City Hall in San Francisco. And now, because of this flap, Mayor London Breed there has ordered the flag to be removed. I've seen the American flag. Yes, the American flag trashed by people who think that's somehow owned by MAGA now. Nobody owns these flags. Nobody owns patriotism. I think it's a very bad thing for San Francisco to take this down and say, okay, that's you now. No, it's not. Why? Washington flew this flag. They own Washington now. No, they do not. And thank you for Bill Maher for coming out with this and pointing this out. One thing with the appeal to heaven flag, and this goes to the common lay person, not necessarily to the more politically activated, but this reminds me of the Odell Rune controversy. When CPAC came to Florida and they contracted somebody to build a stage and gave them creative freedom to build the stage, and they used the Odell Rune, which was a Nordic letter that looked a little bit like the Taurus symbol, except all angular. And they built the stage. And suddenly there was a big controversy because there was a stage being built that looked like a rune that appeared on several SS members' collars. This in spite of the fact that nobody on the right had ever seen this rune before. One of the most searched terms at the time on that day was, what the hell is the Odell Rune? And then it came to find out that the contractors that they used to build the stage were reliable left-wing voters. Oddly enough, that was really weird. And this whole, the appeal to heaven thing, it's got the same air to me. It's got the same vibe to me. I would put money down that 90% of Americans didn't know what the appeal to heaven flag was before they found out that Sam Alito was flying it outside of one of his beach houses. And then, like Mars pointed out, this is a flag that apparently flies at a bunch of cities, even in left-wing governments like San Francisco. And it's been flying there for decades and decades and decades on end. So this controversy looks like it probably came out of complete nothingness. Let's do a couple more things that I like. And we'll go into some things that I hate. Another thing that I like this week. So sometimes I'll look into things that entertain me, like the TV show that I've been watching, even though I've still been on King of the Hill for quite a while. I watch a lot less TV now over the last maybe month and a half than I have before, which is a good thing. Because usually I just turn on the TV and wait till I passed out when I got into bed. Now my attention is otherwise when I go to bed. But as I scroll through Instagram sometimes, I find various different interesting things like cars, movie stuff, music, things like that, recipes, things like that. And I ran across this one a while ago. The handle is It's J Main. And it's a guy, I don't know what his story is because he never talks in his videos. I know nothing about the guy himself. But he silently breaks down and shows where the origins of certain samples for rap songs come from. Various other kinds of trivia about rap songs, especially modern pop culture songs. One of the most interesting things that I see on the channel is where the samples come from for the beats and the rap songs. Some of them I recognize and some of them that I don't. So I'll give you a couple samples of things that he's done. And yeah, we'll probably get copyright pop for this, but some of these you're probably not even going to realize that they came from something as old as it did. And some of them are fairly obvious, like Eminem's Houdini from 2024, from this year. So let's grab a couple of these here. We'll do this one with Jolene for Dolly Parton. So kill the music. Bye-bye, music. Oh. I don't want the comments. I want to listen to it. This is a comparison of Jolene.
Jolene, 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 Jolene. Oh, I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Jolene, 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 Jolene. I'm wanting you, don't come for my man. Jolene.
I didn't even know Beyonce did a cover of that song before this page came to my attention. Here's a sample for Eminem's more famous song, My Name Is.
My name is what? My name is my name is name's Sadie.
Labi Sifri, I Got That, from 1975, if you're listening to the audio platform.
Throw your hands in the air if you's a true player.
Hey girl, ain't no mystery. It's the one and only Digo Double G. Snoop Dogg.
That's David McCallum, The Edge, from 1967. Sample
It was
there.
a clear black night, a clear white moon. Warren G was on the streets trying to consume. I keep forgetting we're not in love anymore.
That's Michael McDonald from 82. This sample's from a Stevie Wonder song.
Been spending most of their lives living in a pastime paradise.
Just waking up in the morning, gotta thank God. I don't know, but today seems kinda odd.
More Isley Brothers.
Can't touch this.
Oh, I listened to it. Let's...
Super freak.
So, definitely worth the listen if you have Instagram to go down through this and see where some of this stuff comes up from. That's the key thing that he does. He does other kinds of trivia too, but the key one is where the samples come from. So, it's J Main over on Instagram, if you guys want to go check that out. One more thing that I like, and then we'll move on to things that I hate. Politico. School choice programs have been wildly successful under DeSantis. Now public schools might close. There's a little bit of things that I hate in this, but this is for the most part what I like. Andrew Atterbury reporting on this one. Florida man Ron DeSantis and the Republicans have spent years aggressively turning the state into a haven for school choice. They've been wildly successful, with tens of thousands more children enrolling in private or charter schools or homeschooling. Now, as these programs balloon, some of Florida's largest school districts are facing staggering enrollment declines and grappling with the possibility of campus closures as dollars follow the increasing number of parents opting out of traditional public schools. The emphasis on these programs has been central to DeSantis' goals of remaking Florida's education system and are poised for another year of growth. DeSantis' school policies are already influencing other GOP-leaning states, many of which have pursued similar voucher programs, but Florida has served as a conservative laboratory for a suite of other policies ranging from attacking public and private sector diversity programs to fighting the Biden admin on immigration. Now, why this landed on things that I like? Because I do want to see a vigorous and robust competition between the public sector and the private sector, especially in education, because when people compete, the students win. When they try to make their programs better, with the students having the option for the same or possibly a slightly elevated cost, it's the students that win. And if the public schools want this money, then they should have to work for it the same as the private schools do now. The objection that I have with this always comes down to the fact that there's going to be a lowest common denominator that is not going to be eligible for these private schools, even under the voucher program. Whether it's because the parent makes too much money to utilize the voucher program in a meaningful fashion, or the fact that they don't have the test scores or something else to get into these private schools. When I see that some of these public schools are shutting down because of the fact that this is coming out, I know that this is going to leave some kids out in the cold, and I don't like that. I don't think the solution is perfect, but I do want to see competition between the two sectors so they can both raise each other up, and as they're competing for the same dollar, they say, oh, the public school improved this, and we're lagging behind in this, so let's improve this. And now the public school is lacking in that, so they come out and improve that. So now the private school says, oh, now we need to go back and improve this. But I still hate the fact that it's leaving kids out in the cold. So there's another solution in here somewhere. We haven't found it yet, but I like the fact that there's competition at least. Oh, Palm had to drop out for a bit. Falling Star says, I can relate, my digital twin doesn't understand me. Alright, thing that I hate number 1. Kay, who is at Crown Nist over on X, says, Bumble added intimacy without commitment to the list of what people are looking for. I'm so jealous of everyone who found love before the internet because of this pure hell. Full disclosure, as I criticize Bumble for this. Pam and I met through Bumble. That's a thing that happened. So, before I start launching criticism, you do need to know what my history is with this website. But yes, they have said, what do you want from your Bumble date? Which, I mean, what do we usually see? Long-term relationship, fun casual dates. This is the one that's checked most often. Marriage, not checked as often. A life partner, or E&M, which I have my own issues with E&M. But intimacy without commitment, which is basically a sanitized way of saying fuck buddies. Or friends with benefits if you're not allowed to say fuck in front of your parents. It's not that I'm opposed to this kind of lifestyle, it's the fact that they have to come back and sanitize the language to see if they can get people to check it off. Because, well, who's going to actually go out there and check fuck buddies? It's the language creoles that's the part that I hate about this. And I don't remember, because it was so long since I signed up for it. I signed up for that. God, that had to have been before I met my third fiance. So that had to have been back in 2018 when I signed up for that for the first time. And I don't remember if they had an option for fuck buddies. But I know it didn't say that. I know for a fact it didn't say that. I'm in a different Discord than the one that I run. Which if you're not in the one that I run, you should be. But I'm in a different Discord than the one that I run. And my friends in that one just constantly rip and rail up and down on Bumble. They think it's the dumbest concept ever. And that was long before we even saw this, so. Speaking of language creoles, from Fox News, presidential historian warns a second Trump term would lead to, get this, dictatorship and anarchy. If you're watching this currently, explain it to me in the live chat. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube or the Twitch replay, answer me in the comments section. If you're listening to this audio platform, use the top link that's in the description and go to my YouTube and comment. How do you have a dictatorship and anarchy at the same fucking time? No, I'm serious. Those are diametrically opposed. Those two things cannot exist in the same place, in the same government system at the same time. Elba Quibus Fantozzi reporting on what Michael Beschloss says, which I don't know why this guy's weighing in on stuff, but an MSDNC presidential historian warned on Saturday if former President Trump were to win back the White House that the U.S. would devolve into dictatorship and anarchy. Yes, he actually said that. He is saying, I will dismantle our rule of law, which is the glory of America, keeps the peace, assures fairness. One who works for all Americans. You've got a dictatorship and anarchy at the same time. Historian Michael Beschlaw said on MSDNC's The Saturday Show with Jonathan Capehart. Palm says, wouldn't Trump be a dictator and his opposition would be anarchy? I don't know if his opposition would be anarchy. I see where you're going with that. I don't know if that would be the term for it, though. I get the concept you're going for with that, though. I can't see how those two concepts exist in the same space. Our food system is back under danger. Probably shouldn't say attack because I'm on YouTube. A significant 5-alarm fire breaks out at one of the nation's largest free-range egg facilities, killing over 1.2 million chickens. Now, this will not affect your grocery store eggs, with the exception of the fact that there is a bit of the market that's affected for regular caged eggs that is affected by the availability of cage-free. So your eggs are going to go up a little bit if you're just grabbing whatever is sitting at the Quick Trip or wherever you get your regular caged eggs from. But that's because there'll be less cage-free for people to go and buy. Watch as numerous firefighters battle against a significant 5-alarm fire that broke out around 6:30 p.m. at a massive chicken farm in Farina, Illinois, housing over 1.2 million chickens. The farm is one of the largest free-range egg facilities in the country. Over 15 fire departments responded to this major fire, with at least 3 buildings catching fire, causing significant property damage. The smoke was so heavy that it was picked up on Doppler radar, reaching between 13,000 and 15,000 feet in the air. And there is your chicken farm on fire. And I've said this before, I don't know if we've ever had a year where we had this many food processing and food storage facilities that have gone up in flames or exploded or had planes flown into them accidentally. I don't know if this is just a unique set of 3 or 4 years that this has happened over and over again on, or if this actually happens all the time and it just doesn't make national news. Because I never remember hearing about this many of these in a 3-year time span. And it's entirely statistically possible that it's happened. And I've just never heard it. But it does seem to be happening all the time. Or at least we seem to be hearing about it all the time. John Bolton is speaking, which there's no mystery of why this isn't things that I hate. John Bolton, yesterday's verdict should signal to people of conscience that we need a change. Nominating a convicted felon would endanger other Republicans up and down the ballot. And then they tell us we can watch our full interview on CNN, but the war walrus wants the Republicans to go start another war.
I think if there's any chance left to get somebody else to replace Trump, which is highly unlikely to be sure, this ought to signal it to people. We've never nominated a convicted felon before, and this is not a good time to start.
You don't actually think there will be a change, do you?
No, but I think people of conscience ought to be thinking about how to approach this. You've heard a lot of criticism of the case on this network. The day the indictment came down, I said if Trump is elected, it could be because of this case. But the fact is you've had 12 jurors find him guilty. And that is going to reverberate with a lot of Americans who are not part of the Trump base. And it could endanger not only the country if Trump gets elected, it could endanger other Republicans on the ballot in November. So I think
those Republicans might actually start a war, unlike the one that hired me. I don't know what we could do without starting another war. My defense contractor stocks were drying up. This one comes from a page called Biden's Wins, which is mostly propagandistic. And I have seen that they're talking about this is an attempt. This isn't actually something that's happening. But Biden's win says, in a stunning announcement, Vice President Harris announces the medical debt can no longer be used to help determine your credit score. This is a big deal. Retweet so all Americans hear this incredible news. That is a lie, by the way. But this account lies all the time. This is not that they're announcing that it can no longer be used. They're attempting to regulate private industry so it's no longer used, but they have to either pass a law, which good luck with the Republican House, or I don't even think they could do it by EO at this point. I was going to say they could EO it and make it happen, but I don't think that would be a legal executive order because there's no law that surrounds it. But let's listen to Vice President Harris.
We also took on the issue of debt, which makes so many people feel like...
Yeah, you took on the issue of debt by making people take out credit cards to get groceries.
They can never get ahead. Take, for example, medical debt. We are now making it so medical debt can no longer be included on your credit score.
You say this with me having a $5,000 deductible. When I first started getting insurance, a $50 deductible was expensive at the time. We've been inflated to the point where that's not that expensive anymore. But you could still reasonably pay your medical deductible with the cash in your pocket. I suggest you write a check and don't send cash through the mail, but you get what I'm going with that. Now you have to take out a small loan to pay that back off.
So that medical debt cannot impact a person's ability to get a car loan, an apartment lease, or a home loan.
I hate to say this, but if you can't pay your medical debt, I don't think that it'd be the best idea for you to go out and buy a house. Unless you're trying to get the housing market the bubble to pop. But unfortunately, that is not something that is in effect yet, but it's something they're attempting to push forward. From Yahoo News. VP Harris touts move to remove medical debt from credit scores. From Christopher Rhodes. As the Biden-Harris re-election campaign kicks into high gear, the president and vice president are highlighting a number of policies and achievements that may have flown under the radar. One such change under the administration looks to improve the credit rating of millions of Americans and ease the enormous problem of medical debt that many people face. Speaking with President Biden on Wednesday in an appearance aimed at black voters, VP Harris touted the admin's efforts to address some of the biggest issues facing the black community. One achievement she highlighted was a new set of federal policies concerning medical debt. We're now making it so medical debt can no longer be included on your credit score, the vice president said, so that medical debt cannot impact a person's ability to get a car loan, an apartment lease, or a home loan. Vice President Harris first announced the new policy in September during an event with Rohit Chopra, the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a government agency created after the 2008 financial meltdown. Harris said at that event, no one in this country should have to go into debt to get the quality health care they need. At the time of the September announcement, the details of the new policy have yet to be developed by Chopra's agency. So they are trying to do this through executive action. The policy change kicks in on July 1st. Now, I got this feeling this one's going to be blocked. But it is not in effect as of right now, and without actually having legislation to go through it, I don't know that they can actually do this one. Alex Jones is in the news again. As far as Alex goes, I think it was tremendously stupid what he said about the Sandy Hook families, and I stayed by that position. But I also believe that freedom of speech protects tremendously stupid speech, whether I agree with it or not, which in the Sandy Hook case I do not. And this is a person who has been railroaded under every single situation that he has to be railroaded under, incurring a settlement that no reasonable person would ever be asked to pay, because it's out of the scope of most individuals' hands. They were talking about the 8th Amendment on this, and while this is a civil suit, or this is a civil settlement, the 8th Amendment should still kick into play on obscene forfeitures and fines and punishments, cruel and unusual. But now the Sandy Hook parents are asking to force the liquidation of Alex Jones's media company. CBS News reporting. Relatives of victims of Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting are asking the bankruptcy judge to liquidate Alex Jones's media company, InfoWars, instead of allowing him to reorganize his business as they seek to collect $1.5 billion in lawsuit verdicts against him. Lawyers for the families filed an emergency motion on Sunday in U.S. bankruptcy court in Houston, saying Free Speech Systems has no prospect of getting a reorganization plan approved by a court and has failed to demonstrate any hope of beginning to satisfy the legal claims, which relate to Jones calling the 2012 school shooting a hoax. A hearing in Free Speech Systems' bankruptcy case was scheduled for Monday related to a dispute over the company's finances. Jones went on his web show and radio show over the weekend saying there was a conspiracy against him and he expected InfoWars to be shut down in a month or two. Because of the family's bankruptcy court filings, the comments included profanity-laden rants, and Jones appeared to cry at points, which we have video of that. Let's listen.
At the end of the day, we're gonna beat these people. I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but it's been a hard fight. These people hate our children. Just take more calls. Go ahead, who's the next person?
What was gross about this is a lot of, again, the paid left-wing accounts over on X have been taking a victory lap over this one. Dancing on the proverbial grave of the empire that would be InfoWars. But I don't think they're going to be prepared for this one here because the judge has rejected the call from the Associated Press. Judge rejects call to immediately shut down Alex Jones's InfoWars and bankruptcy dispute. From Dave Collins. After a weekend in which Alex Jones warned that his media company faced an imminent shutdown by the federal government because of his bankruptcy cases, a judge on Monday allowed Jones to keep operating for the next 2 weeks while it decided whether his assets should be liquidated. Both Jones and his company filed for bankruptcy after he lost 2 lawsuits and was ordered to pay $1.5 billion. The parents sued Jones for calling the shooting that killed 20 first graders and 6 educators a hoax. The families have opposed Jones's reorganization plans. One Sunday, they filed an emergency motion to convert Free Speech Systems' bankruptcy reorganization into a liquidation, saying Jones has not made progress in showing how he will pay the lawsuit judgments. And I know he's going to have to appeal this, and I know that's going to take years. And it appears that the people who are his opponents want to get their money and get it spent before he can go back and get it appealed. So we will continue to watch that and see what happens. So the last 2 that I have here are in relation to what happened with the verdict. I don't really need to go through a lot of the articles with this. Just the talk that I have and the thing that I hate about this is the fact that we've been so conditioned to see a false flag anywhere as long as it's our side involved. And again, the government elites, the people who are in power, the judges, and the people above that gain more power by keeping us divided against ourselves as the little people. Because we're all coming out and voting for one set of control freaks or the other set of control freaks to try to put a damper on the people who would vote for one set of control freaks or the other set of control freaks. when we're divided, they win. The control freaks win. But what I say when I say this, when I talk about this, is the fact that there were two pretty major incidences that happened on video. One was a group of pro-Palestinian protesters on the Friday after the verdict got handed down, who went in immediately and busted in to the Brooklyn Museum and occupied it. Several of these protesters got arrested. And when this came out, one of the first things that we started hearing was these were the protesters who were in the area who were supposed to go back out in front of Trump Tower and start being the false flag in front of Trump Tower. They just changed their outfits. And then, of course, I was talking about this one in the Discord and on X, that there was a mass shooting involving at least one police officer in Minneapolis as well. This happened on Thursday, on the night of the verdict coming down. And one of the first sentiments that came back out, and I will admit fully that I was one of the people who perpetuated this, was people questioning whether or not this was going to be a person who had a MAGA hat right after this verdict came down. And I hate the fact that this is the first place that we have to think, especially when something like this happens and gets swallowed up by the news cycle, while we are in the midst of something that is likely to cause duress and possibly political violence. And unfortunately, there was a loss of life in this one. So, that is what I hate about this. It's not the fact that I hate that these things happen, it's the fact that the rhetoric surrounding them automatically went straight to political violence. You can cut the tension with a knife in this country. And it does worry me every day when I see it continue and the rubber band gets stretched tighter and tighter and tighter. And my heart goes out to the family of the police officer who lost their loved one. Alright, I'm gonna head out of here. Let's get one last check of the chat. It's probably gonna be Palm. Yeah, Palm Chatter was the last chat. Alright, a good 2.5 hour one. Where is my outro music? There it is. That's really loud. I don't know why. Huh. It went straight from full crank down to the very bottom just by clicking that over a little bit. Anyway. Thank you, everybody who came by and hung out and chatted in the live chat. The lurkers, the listeners, we had a good lurk party going on over on the Rumble side. It looks like they're still over there. If you guys want to comment or at least throw a like over there, that'd be awesome of you to do. So thank you for that. Thank you for Mog and Vong and Falling Stars over on the main side, which would all be over on the Twitch side, and the lurkers that came and hung out over there. I know that we cranked a few of them up there, but we had a lot of lurkers there as well. The audio platform for this live stream will be out by morning before I go into work, so if you want to take it on the go, you can check that out. Otherwise, there will be a real upload of this video set to YouTube. This live stream, of course, being set to private. Watch for that in the morning as we go. And for news, we'll be back here this coming Friday for more news, more headline, or this coming Monday rather, for more news, more headlines, more contemporary. Watch for that. As far as gaming stream goes, I still intend to do Diablo 2 on Wednesday, Fallout Fridays, both days. Keep in mind my work schedule has changed, so my start times will be tentative at this point. I should still be able to start at 7 for both of them, so that'll be coming up in the near future. Thank you again. Take care. Have a wonderful night. Hug your family. Call your mom. Get some dinner. Get some good sleep. And we'll see you here next time for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.